The moment Daniel Brooks's head touched Clara Vaughn's shoulder, time stopped. In a boardroom where even breathing felt like an act of defiance, the company's most feared CEO sat perfectly still, while her exhausted assistant collapsed against her in front of 20 stunned executives. No one moved. No one spoke. Everyone waited for the explosion that never came. What looked like a career-ending disaster became something else entirely. But before I tell you how a single moment of weakness changed 2 lives forever, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Daniel Brooks had exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes of sleep in the last 3 days. He knew this because he'd been counting. Counting had become a survival mechanism, a way to measure whether he was holding it together or quietly falling apart. 4 hours on Monday night, interrupted twice by his daughter's nightmares. 2 hours Tuesday, she'd had a fever that spiked at 2 a.m. Wednesday, 53 minutes total. Thursday morning had arrived like a freight train he couldn't stop. And now here he was, standing in the executive conference room on the 42nd floor of Vaughn Industries, trying to remember why his hands were shaking. The coffee wasn't working anymore. It hadn't worked in weeks. Daniel stood near the back wall, tablet in hand, stylus poised above the screen like a weapon he'd forgotten how to use. Around the massive glass table, 20 of the company's highest-ranking executives sat in rigid silence. Their eyes locked on the woman at the head of the room, Clara Vaughan. Even her name felt sharp. She stood framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, her tailored charcoal suit immaculate, her dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested control over even the smallest details. At 38, she'd built Vaughn Industries into a billion-dollar empire through precision, discipline, and an almost pathological refusal to tolerate weakness. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The Q3 projections are unacceptable," Clara said, her tone cold and surgical. "We're not here to meet expectations. We're here to obliterate them." Her gaze swept the room like a scalpel. "Hendricks, your team missed the target by 12%. Explain." Martin Hendricks, a vice president who'd survived 4 corporate purges, shifted in his seat. "Market volatility is an excuse," Clara interrupted. "Not a strategy. Try again." Daniel watched from his position against the wall, his vision beginning to blur at the edges. He blinked hard, forcing his eyes to focus on the tablet screen. His notes were meticulous. They always were. Clara demanded nothing less. Every data point, every projection, every minute of this meeting documented with perfect clarity. Except he couldn't read his own handwriting anymore. The letters were swimming, the numbers doubled, then tripled. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them again. Better. Slightly better. Just get through the meeting, he told himself. 90 minutes. You can do 90 minutes. "Mr. Brooks?" Clara's voice cut through the fog in his brain like a blade. Daniel's head snapped up. Everyone was looking at him. "Yes, Ms. Vaughan?" His voice came out steady. "Good. That was good. The financial breakdown for the Meridian acquisition. Pull it up on the main screen." "Of course." He tapped the tablet, fingers moving on muscle memory. The file opened. He swiped it to the central display mounted on the wall. Charts appeared, revenue projections, risk assessments, integration timelines, everything exactly where it should be. Clara didn't thank him. She never did. She simply turned back to the executives and continued dismantling their quarterly performance with methodical efficiency. Daniel exhaled slowly and stepped back against the wall. The room was too warm. Or maybe it was just him. He couldn't tell anymore. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a frequency that made his skull ache. He'd taken ibuprofen this morning, or was that yesterday? The days were bleeding together. Last night Emma had woken up crying at midnight. Not the usual nightmare. This was different. She'd been calling for her mother, sobbing in a way that shattered something inside Daniel's chest every single time. "Daddy, why did Mommy leave?" 6 years old, and she still asked that question. "She didn't want to leave, sweetheart," Daniel had whispered, holding her small body against his chest. "She got sick. But she loved you so much. I don't remember her." "I know, baby. I know." He'd stayed with her until she fell back asleep, curled around her stuffed elephant, her breathing finally evening out around 3 a.m. Then he'd gone back to the living room, finished the financial report Clara needed by morning, and showered in cold water to shock himself awake. Now standing in this glass tower watching the city sprawl below, Daniel felt the weight of it all pressing down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. He just needed to hold on a little longer. "Brooks, the Carver contract revisions," Clara's voice again. Always Clara's voice. "On your screen now, Ms. Vaughn," Daniel said, sending the file before she finished the sentence. A flicker of something crossed her face. Approval, maybe, though it was gone too quickly to be sure. Clara Vaughn didn't give compliments. She gave objectives. You either met them or you disappeared. Daniel had watched 12 assistants cycle through this position in the 2 years before he'd been hired. Most lasted 3 months. The longest made it to 7. When Daniel passed his 1-year anniversary, people in the office started looking at him differently, like he'd survived something they couldn't quite understand. He understood it perfectly. He survived because he had no choice. Emma needed health insurance. She needed stability. She needed a father who could pay for her school, her therapy appointments, her art classes that made her smile in ways that reminded Daniel of his late wife. So Daniel did what no one else could. He became indispensable. He anticipated Clara's needs before she articulated them. He fixed problems before they became crises. He worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took to stay ahead of the impossible standards she set. And he never, ever let her see him struggling. "The meridian numbers are conservative," Clara said, gesturing at the screen. "I want aggressive. I want growth trajectories that assume best-case scenarios across all verticals." "That's risky," someone ventured. Daniel thought it might be Peterson from legal. Clara turned slowly. "Risk is the only thing that separates us from mediocrity. If you're not comfortable with that, there's the door." Silence. Daniel's vision blurred again. He shifted his weight, locked his knees. The trick was to keep moving, small movements, micro adjustments. If you stayed completely still, your body started to shut down. 4 hours and 17 minutes of sleep. He'd survived on less. The meeting dragged on. 40 minutes became 50. Clara methodically destroyed every excuse, challenged every assumption, pushed until people either rose to her standards or crumbled. Daniel had seen executives leave these meetings in tears. He'd seen grown men shake. Clara didn't do it out of cruelty. That's what people didn't understand. She did it because she believed, genuinely believed, that excellence was the only acceptable outcome. Anything less was betrayal. Daniel respected that, even when it terrified him. 60 minutes, 70. His head was pounding now, a steady throb behind his eyes that made it hard to think. The coffee had turned to acid in his stomach. He needed to sit down, just for a moment, No. Not here, not in front of everyone. He pressed his back harder against the wall, feeling the cool surface through his shirt. Focus on that. The cold. The solid reality of it. "We'll reconvene Monday," Clara said suddenly. "I want revised projections on my desk by 9 a.m. Not 9:01. Not 9:15. 9. Sharp." Chairs scraped. Bodies moved. The executives filed out with the careful efficiency of people who'd just survived an interrogation. Daniel stayed where he was, tablet in hand, waiting for the inevitable final tasks. Clara always had follow-up items. Always. But she didn't speak. The last executive left, the door clicking shut with a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden quiet. Clara stood at the window, her back to him, looking out at the city. "Mr. Brooks," she said without turning, "the Henderson file. There's a discrepancy in the third quarter analysis." "I'll fix it," Daniel said automatically. "I know you will." She turned then, her dark eyes meeting his across the empty room. That's when it happened. Daniel's vision didn't just blur, it tunneled. The edges went dark. His knees unlocked despite every command from his brain screaming at them to stay rigid. He felt himself tipping forward, the world tilting at an angle that didn't make sense. His last conscious thought was that he needed to catch himself, needed to grab the wall, needed to do anything except his head came to rest on something warm, something that smelled faintly of bergamot, and something else he couldn't name. Clara's shoulder. Time fractured. Daniel's mind registered the mistake in slow motion, the catastrophic, career-ending impossibility of what was happening. He was touching Clara Vaughn, not just touching, leaning against her, his full weight supported by her smaller frame. He tried to move. His body wouldn't respond. Through the haze, he felt her shift slightly, adjusting to bear his weight without stepping away. She didn't push him off. She didn't move at all. The door was still closed. They were alone in the conference room, and Daniel Brooks, exhausted, terrified, barely conscious, was literally sleeping on his boss's shoulder. This is it, he thought distantly. This is how I lose everything. But Clara still didn't move. Her voice came from somewhere above him, quiet in a way he'd never heard before. "Mr. Brooks?" she said. "How long has it been since you slept?" The question penetrated the fog. He tried to answer, but his mouth wouldn't form the words. "Daniel!" His first name. She'd never used his first name. "How long?" "4 hours," he managed. The words came out slurred. 3 days. Silence. He could feel her breathing, steady and controlled even now. "Your daughter," Clara said. It wasn't a question. Daniel forced his eyes open, though the effort felt monumental. He was still leaning against her. He could see the sleeve of her suit jacket, the perfect line of it, now slightly wrinkled from his weight. "Emma," he whispered. Nightmares. Fever. I can't let her down." "So you're letting yourself collapse instead." The words should have been harsh, but they weren't. They were something else, something Daniel couldn't quite identify through the exhaustion. He tried to pull away, to stand up straight, to salvage whatever microscopic shred of professionalism might still exist. His legs shook with the effort. Clara's hand came up. He saw it in his peripheral vision and rested lightly on his shoulder, keeping him in place. "Stay," she said quietly. Daniel's brain short-circuited. "Stay?" "You're not capable of driving right now," Clara continued, her voice returning to something closer to its usual crisp efficiency. "You're barely capable of standing." "I'm fine," Daniel lied. You need rest. Actual rest. Not whatever you've been calling sleep." She shifted then, carefully, supporting his weight as she guided him toward one of the conference chairs. Daniel sank into it, his body grateful despite his mind screaming protests. Clara stood above him, her expression unreadable. "This meeting is over," she said. "Go home. Sleep. That's not a suggestion. I have the Henderson file. We'll still be there tomorrow." She paused. "When was the last time you took a full day off?" Daniel tried to remember. The answer didn't come. "Exactly," Clara said. She moved to the conference room door, opened it, then turned back. "Mr. Brooks, Daniel, I'm going to say this once, and I need you to hear it." He looked up at her, vision still swimming. "Your daughter needs you alive and functional. This," she gestured at him, at the state he was in, "is neither. You're no good to her if you're running yourself into the ground." Something in her voice made Daniel's throat tighten. It wasn't pity, it was something sharper, something that sounded almost like understanding. "I'll have my driver take you home," Clara continued. "You'll take tomorrow off. Paid. Non-negotiable." "Ms. Vaughn, I can't." "You can. You will." She paused in the doorway. "And Daniel, next time you're drowning, you say something before you collapse in the middle of my conference room. Understood?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. Clara left, her heels clicking away down the corridor. Daniel sat in the empty conference room, the city stretching out below him, and for the first time in 3 years, he let himself acknowledge the truth he'd been running from. He couldn't do this alone anymore. But the more terrifying realization followed immediately after. Clara Vaughn had just seen him at his weakest, and instead of destroying him, she'd caught him. What the hell did that mean? 3 hours later, Daniel stood in his apartment, Emma asleep in her room, and tried to process what had happened. Clara's driver, an efficient, silent man named Marcus, had delivered him home with instructions to rest per Ms. Vaughn's orders. The tone suggested that disobeying would result in consequences Daniel didn't want to imagine. So here he was, home at 2 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. No urgent emails, no crisis calls, no midnight work sessions looming, just silence. It felt wrong. It felt like he was forgetting something critical, like he'd left the stove on or missed an important deadline. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from Clara's corporate number. Your access codes have been temporarily suspended until Monday. Do not attempt to log in remotely. This is for your own good. CV. She'd locked him out of the system. Daniel stared at the screen in disbelief. Then, despite everything, he laughed. It came out rough and exhausted, but it was a laugh nonetheless. Clara Vaughn, the woman who'd made vice presidents weep, had just forced him to take a vacation by literally cutting off his ability to work. He should be angry. He should be terrified about what this meant for his job security. Instead, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Cared for. The thought stopped him cold. No, that wasn't right. Clara didn't care about people. She optimized them. She fixed inefficiencies. This was just resource management, making sure her assistant didn't burn out before she could find a replacement. That had to be it. But as Daniel finally allowed himself to lie down on his bed in the middle of the afternoon, his mind kept returning to one detail. The moment his head had touched her shoulder, Clara Vaughn could have pushed him away. Should have, by every social and professional standard. She hadn't. She'd held steady under his weight, adjusted to support him, and spoken to him with something in her voice that sounded almost like Daniel fell asleep before he could finish the thought. At Vaughn Industries, Clara sat in her office on the 44th floor, the door closed, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Her shoulder still felt warm where Daniel's head had rested. She'd sent everyone home early from the meeting without explanation. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. It didn't matter. What mattered was the look in Daniel Brooks' eyes when he'd tried to apologize for something that wasn't his fault. Clara had built her empire on the principle that weakness was unacceptable, that excellence required sacrifice, that emotion was a liability in the pursuit of perfection. She'd believed that for 15 years. But standing in that conference room, feeling the full weight of another human being's exhaustion pressed against her, Clara had felt something crack in the foundation of her carefully constructed world. Daniel hadn't been weak. He'd been surviving. There was a difference. Clara opened her laptop, pulled up Daniel's personnel file. The details were familiar. She'd reviewed them when hiring him, of course, but she read them again now with different eyes. Widowed, single father, daughter, Emma Brooks, age 6. Wife deceased, 3 years prior. Cancer. Emergency contacts, none listed. No family, no support system. No one to help when his daughter had nightmares or fevers or needed someone to simply be there. Just him. Alone. And he'd never said a word. Never asked for accommodation. Never used his circumstances as an excuse. He'd simply endured. Clara closed the file, her jaw tight. She'd built her company on the backs of people who could withstand pressure. But there was a difference between pressure and drowning. Daniel was drowning. And somehow, in a moment that should have meant nothing, Clara had decided she wasn't going to let him go under. She didn't examine that decision too closely. Didn't question why her carefully maintained professional distance had evaporated the second she'd heard his daughter's name whispered in that broken voice. Some decisions didn't need justification. They just needed action. Clara picked up her phone, dialed her head of HR. Janet, it's Clara. I need you to pull Daniel Brooks's schedule for the next month. I want to see every late night, every weekend, every hour he's been in this building outside normal working hours. Of course, Ms. Vaughn. May I ask why? No, Clara said simply. But I also need you to draft a new policy. Flexible scheduling for employees with dependent care responsibilities. I want it on my desk by Monday. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's quite a departure from our current structure. Our current structure has a man collapsing from exhaustion in my conference room because he's too afraid to ask for basic human consideration, Clara said coldly. Draft the policy. Yes, Ms. Vaughn. Clara ended the call, then sat back in her chair, looking out at the city. She didn't do this. She didn't adjust her company around individual circumstances. She didn't create policy exceptions. But she also didn't let valuable people break. And Daniel Brooks, quiet, meticulous, impossibly resilient Daniel Brooks, was valuable. That was the only reason, Clara told herself. The only reason that mattered. The fact that she could still feel the warmth of his temple against her collarbone, could still hear the raw honesty in his voice when he'd spoken his daughter's name. that was irrelevant. It had to be. Because if it wasn't irrelevant, if it meant something more, then Clara had just crossed a line she'd spent 15 years never approaching, and she had absolutely no idea what to do about it. Daniel woke up 12 hours later. The apartment was dark. His phone showed 2:47 a.m. in glowing numbers. Friday morning. He'd slept through the entire afternoon, evening, and half the night. Panic hit first. Emma, where was Emma? But then he heard it. Her small, even breaths coming from the bedroom down the hall. Still asleep. Safe. Daniel exhaled, his heart rate slowly returning to normal. He should go back to sleep. His body was still exhausted, still catching up on a debt he'd been accumulating for months. But his mind was awake now, turning over the events of yesterday. Clara's hand on his shoulder, her voice saying his first name, the way she'd stood there, supporting his weight, when she could have let him fall. Your daughter needs you alive and functional. No one at Vaughn Industries talked like that. No one acknowledged that their employees had lives outside the office, had families, had breaking points. But Clara had. Why? Daniel got up, moved quietly through the apartment to check on Emma. She was sprawled across her bed, her stuffed elephant clutched in one arm, her dark hair messy across the pillow. So small, so fragile. He adjusted her blanket, pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Daddy? Her voice was sleepy, barely awake. I'm here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. You're home early, she mumbled. Early. It was 3 a.m., and to Emma, this was early. Daniel's chest ached. Yeah, baby, I'm home. Good, Emma whispered, then already drifting off again. I like when you're home. She was asleep before Daniel could respond. He stood there for a long time, watching her breathe, and made a decision. He couldn't keep doing this. Couldn't keep running himself into the ground. Couldn't keep pretending that he was holding everything together, when in reality, he was one bad night away from complete collapse. Emma deserved better. He deserved better. And somehow, impossibly, Clara Vaughn had seen that when no one else had. Monday morning, Daniel thought, he'd go back to work. He'd thank her professionally. He'd assure her it wouldn't happen again. And then what? Because something had shifted yesterday in that conference room. Some fundamental equation had changed. Claire had seen him at his absolute worst. And instead of ending him, she'd protected him. Daniel didn't know what that meant. But he knew, with absolute certainty, that nothing was going to be the same. The question was whether that terrified him or gave him something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the city feel almost optimistic. Daniel stood outside Vaughn Industries at 8:45 a.m., his coffee growing cold in his hand, staring up at the glass tower that had consumed his life for the past 18 months. He'd spent the entire weekend rehearsing what he'd say to Clara. Professional, grateful, brief. He'd thank her for her unexpected kindness, assure her that Friday's incident was an anomaly, and then bury himself and work hard enough to prove he deserved to keep his job. Simple, clean, no complications. Except his hands were shaking, and it had nothing to do with the coffee. Daniel took a breath and walked inside. The lobby was its usual controlled chaos, executives in sharp suits, assistants juggling tablets and phones, everyone moving with the purposeful intensity of people who understood that time was the most valuable commodity Vaughn Industries traded in. Security waved him through with barely a glance. The elevator ride to 42 felt both too long and not nearly long enough. When the doors opened, Sarah Chen from accounting was waiting with a look that made Daniel's stomach drop. "You're alive," she said, not quite joking. "Why wouldn't I be?" Sarah lowered her voice. "Daniel, you passed out on Clara Vaughn's shoulder in the middle of a board meeting. Half the office thinks you got fired. The other half thinks you're dead." "I didn't pass out," Daniel said automatically. "I just collapsed from exhaustion in front of 20 witnesses?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, the rumor mill has been having a field day. Peterson from legal started a betting pool on whether you'd show up today." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Of course they had. "What's the spread?" 3-1 you'd resigned over the weekend out of sheer humiliation. Sarah paused. "I put $20 on you being too stubborn to quit." Despite everything, Daniel almost smiled. "Thanks for the vote of confidence." So what actually happened after Clara sent everyone home? She told me to go home and sleep. Sarah stared at him like he'd just claimed to have tea with a unicorn. Clara Vaughn, told you, to rest. Apparently I looked that bad. You looked half dead, Sarah said bluntly. But Clara doesn't do compassion. She does efficiency. This is weird. It was weird. Daniel knew it was weird. He just didn't know what to do about it. I should get to my desk, he said. Good luck, Sarah called after him. Try not to collapse on anyone important today. Daniel made his way through the cubicle maze to the small office adjacent to Clara's corner suite. His space was modest, a desk, 2 monitors, a filing cabinet, but it had a door that closed and a window that looked out over the city. For an assistant, it was practically a palace. He set his briefcase down, logged into his computer, and waited for the system access that Clara had suspended on Thursday. The login worked. Daniel stared at the screen, then checked his email. 473 unread messages, most of them routine. But at the top, flagged as urgent and sent at 6 a.m. this morning, was one from Clara. Subject: Schedule modifications. Mr. Brooks, effective immediately, your working hours are adjusted to 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. No exceptions without prior approval. Your evening and weekend access to the building has been restricted to emergency situations only, which will be defined by me, not you. Additionally, you are required to take 1 hour for lunch away from your desk. Non-negotiable. Your salary will remain unchanged despite the reduced hours. Consider the difference in investment in not having you collapse in my conference room again. We have a 9:30 meeting. Don't be late. Daniel read it twice, then a third time, convinced he was missing something. Clara Vaughn had just cut his hours and told him to take lunch breaks. Clara Vaughn, who once fired a director for leaving at 6 p.m. to attend his daughter's graduation. Clara Vaughn, whose previous assistant had a cot installed in his office because going home seemed inefficient. This didn't make sense. Unless... Daniel's mind went to the darkest possibility. She was phasing him out, reducing his hours, limiting his responsibilities, making him irrelevant before showing him the door. It would be like Clara to do it methodically, to avoid the messiness of an abrupt termination. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop spiraling. You're not being fired. CV. Daniel nearly dropped the phone. How did she... Another text. Your calendar syncs to mine. I can see you arrived 20 minutes early and have been sitting at your desk rereading the same email. Get coffee. Calm down. Be in my office at 9:30. She was tracking his computer activity. Of course she was. Daniel grabbed his coffee mug and headed for the break room, trying to ignore the way conversation stopped when he walked past. The gossip had clearly spread faster than a corporate email blast. He was pouring his second cup when someone spoke behind him. The prodigal assistant returns. Daniel turned to find Marcus Hendricks, the VP who'd been eviscerated in Thursday's meeting, leaning against the counter with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus? Rough week? Hendricks asked, his tone suggesting he knew exactly how rough. You could say that. Interesting, though. Clara sending everyone home early. Very unlike her. Hendricks took a slow sip of his own coffee. Makes a person wonder what warranted such special treatment. There was an edge to the words that made Daniel's spine straighten. I wasn't feeling well. She noticed. That's all. Right. And she just happened to give you a 3-day weekend and restructure your entire schedule out of the goodness of her heart. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, Hendricks said smoothly. Just observing that Clara doesn't do favors without reason. So either you've got something on her, or... He let the sentence hang, the insinuation clear. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. Or she's a decent human being who noticed one of her employees was about to collapse from exhaustion and intervened. Radical concept, I know. Decent human being, Hendricks laughed. We're talking about Clara Vaughn, the woman who made Thompson work through his father's funeral. But sure, she suddenly developed a conscience, just for you. Is there a point to this conversation? Hendricks stepped closer, lowering his voice. The point is that favoritism gets noticed around here, and people talk. So whatever arrangement you've got going, there's no arrangement. Then you won't mind if I mention your new special schedule to HR, just to make sure everything's above board? Daniel met his gaze steadily. Do whatever you need to do. I've got nothing to hide. He walked out before Hendricks could respond, his coffee forgotten on the counter. The confrontation rattled him more than it should have, because Hendricks was right about one thing. Clara's behavior was completely out of character, and in a company where perception was everything, that made Daniel a target. He made it back to his office with 5 minutes to spare before the 9:30 meeting. His hands were steadier now, his mind clearer. Whatever this meeting was about, he'd handle it professionally. He'd been handling Clara Vaughn for 18 months. He could handle one conversation. At exactly 9:30, Daniel knocked on Clara's office door. Come in. She was standing at her desk, reviewing something on her tablet, dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent. She didn't look up when he entered. Close the door, she said. Daniel did, then waited. Clara finished whatever she was reading, set the tablet down, and finally looked at him. Her dark eyes were unreadable, her expression neutral. You look better, she said. I feel better. Thank you. Don't thank me. I can't have my assistant passing out during critical meetings. Bad optics. There was the Clara he knew, practical, detached, but something in her voice didn't quite match the words. About Thursday, Daniel started, is handled. We're not discussing it further. Ms. Vaughn, I need to apologize. For what? Clara cut him off. For being human? For having limitations? That's not an apology I'm interested in hearing. Daniel blinked. I collapsed in the middle of your presentation. You collapsed because you were operating on 4 hours of sleep in 3 days while single-handedly raising a 6-year-old child. Those are facts, not failures. The directness of it caught him off guard. Clara didn't usually acknowledge personal circumstances. She dealt in results, not reasons. Still, Daniel said carefully, it won't happen again. It won't, Clara agreed, because I've modified your schedule to prevent it. I saw the email. I appreciate the gesture, but it's not necessary. It wasn't a gesture. It was a business decision. Clara moved around her desk, closer to him. You're the best assistant I've ever had, Mr. Brooks. You're efficient, thorough, and you anticipate needs before they're articulated. Those are rare qualities. Losing you would set me back considerably. I'm not going anywhere. You were about to burn out so completely that you'd either collapse again or quit. I've seen it happen a dozen times. I'm not interested in repeating the pattern. She was framing it as pure pragmatism, but Daniel heard something else underneath. Something that sounded almost like concern. The new hours will work, Clara continued. You'll maintain your current responsibilities during business hours. Anything that requires evening or weekend work will be redistributed to other departments. That's not fair to them. I don't pay you to worry about fairness. I pay you to do your job, which you'll be significantly better at when you're not half-conscious. Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he could handle the old schedule, that he didn't need special treatment, but the truth was, the past 3 days had been the first time in months that he'd felt remotely human. Emma had noticed too. She'd woken up Sunday morning to find him making pancakes, actually making breakfast instead of throwing a granola bar at her on the way out the door, and she'd looked at him like he'd given her the world. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. Clara's expression shifted just slightly. Your daughter, Emma, how is she? The question surprised him. Clara never asked about personal matters. She's good. Better. She had a good weekend. Nightmares? Daniel hesitated, wondering how much she remembered from Thursday's fog. Sometimes. It's been 3 years since my wife died, but Emma still struggles with it. Clara nodded slowly. You're doing this alone. No family support. My wife's parents passed before Emma was born. Mine aren't in the picture. That was a diplomatic way of saying his father had walked out when Daniel was 12 and his mother had made it clear that raising a grandchild wasn't her responsibility. And you've been managing full-time work and full-time parenting without asking for any accommodation. I didn't want to seem weak. That's idiotic, Clara said bluntly. Asking for what you need isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Coming from Clara Vaughn, who'd built an empire on refusing to show vulnerability, the statement was almost laughable, but she delivered it with complete sincerity. In my experience, Daniel said carefully, asking for special treatment usually results in being replaced by someone who doesn't need it. Then you've worked for idiots. Clara returned to her desk, picking up the tablet again. Competent employees are investments. You don't throw away investments because they have life circumstances. You adjust the parameters to maximize return. There it was again, the business framing. But her eyes told a different story. I've scheduled a meeting with HR this afternoon, Clara continued. We're implementing a company-wide policy for flexible scheduling. Employees with dependent care responsibilities will be able to request modified hours without penalty. Daniel stared at her. You're changing company policy because of what happened Thursday? I'm changing company policy because it's long overdue and makes business sense. Thursday simply highlighted an existing gap. She paused. You'll be part of the pilot program, along with 7 other employees who've been quietly burning out while we pretend not to notice. Ms. Vaughn, Clara. The word hung in the air between them. What? Daniel said. When we're alone, you can call me Clara. The formality is exhausting. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. Assistants didn't call their bosses by their first names. Clara Vaughn didn't implement sweeping policy changes based on one incident, and she definitely didn't look at her employees with something that resembled actual warmth. I don't think that's appropriate, Daniel said. Why not? Because you're my boss. Because there are professional boundaries. Because people will talk? Clara's expression hardened slightly. They're already talking, Mr. Brooks. Marcus Hendricks approached you in the break room this morning. I assume he made some insinuation about favoritism or impropriety. How did you, building security cameras. He got within 8 inches of you and lowered his voice to what he clearly thought was a threatening register. Clara's tone went cold. Would you like me to deal with it? No, I can handle Hendricks. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. She set the tablet down again, her full attention on Daniel now. I'm going to be very clear about something because apparently subtlety isn't working. What happened Thursday changed nothing about your professional standing in this company. You're still my assistant. You still report to me. Your performance standards haven't decreased. Then what has changed? Clara was quiet for a moment, and Daniel saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty, maybe, or conflict. My awareness, she said finally. I've spent 15 years optimizing this company for maximum efficiency, and I've been very good at it. But efficiency that destroys the people executing it isn't sustainable. It's exploitation. You're not exploiting anyone. I had an assistant collapse from exhaustion in my conference room because he was too afraid to ask for basic human consideration, Clara said sharply. That's the definition of exploitation, and I'm not interested in running that kind of company anymore. The admission seemed to cost her something. Daniel could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her jaw tightened. So yes, Clara continued, your schedule has changed, and yes, I'm implementing policies to prevent this from happening to anyone else. And if people want to gossip about why, let them. I've built this company on not caring what people think of me. But you care what I think. The words were out before Daniel could stop them. Clara's eyes met his, and for a moment, the professional mask slipped completely. What he saw underneath was complicated. Sharp intelligence, fierce protectiveness, and something else that made his breath catch. Yes, she said simply. I do. The silence stretched between them, loaded with implications neither of them seemed ready to name. Daniel's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He glanced at it reflexively. Emma's school. I need to take this, he said. Clara nodded. Of course. Daniel stepped into the hallway, his heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the phone call. Mr. Brooks? The school nurse's voice was calm but concerned. Emma's running a fever. 101.2. She's asking for you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and turned to find Clara standing in her office doorway. Emma? She asked. Fever. I need to pick her up from school. Go. I'll make up the time. Daniel, his name again, not his title. Go take care of your daughter. That's not a request. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he could handle both, but the truth was he couldn't. Not today. Maybe not ever. Thank you. he said. Clara's expression softened in a way that was becoming dangerously familiar. Text me when you know she's okay. You don't need to. I know I don't need to. I want to. She paused. And Daniel? Stop assuming the worst. You're not getting fired. You're not being phased out. You're being taken care of. Learn to accept it. She went back into her office, leaving Daniel standing in the hallway, his carefully constructed understanding of Clara Vaughn in complete ruins. He made it to Emma's school in 15 minutes, breaking every traffic law in the process. She was waiting in the nurse's office, small and miserable, her face flushed with fever. "Daddy," she whispered, and the relief in her voice broke something in Daniel's chest. "I'm here, sweetheart. Let's get you home." He carried her to the car. She was getting too big for this, but she curled against his chest like when she was tiny, and drove home while she dozed against the window. By the time they were settled in the apartment, Emma tucked into bed with medicine and water and her stuffed elephant, it was almost noon. Daniel sat beside her, watching her sleep, and pulled out his phone. He should text Clara. She'd asked him to. "But what did you say to your boss who just rearranged company policy around your life and asked you to call her by her first name?" Before he could overthink it, he typed, "Emma's resting. Fever's down. Thank you for letting me leave." The response came within 30 seconds. "Stop thanking me. How high was the fever?" 101.2 at school. Down to 99.8 now. Good. Stay home tomorrow if needed. No arguments. Daniel stared at the messages. This wasn't how bosses talked to employees. This was how friends talked. Maybe more than friends. He typed, "Why are you doing this?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Whatever Clara was writing, she was struggling with it. Finally, "Because no one did it for me, and I remember what that cost." Daniel read the message 3 times, his mind racing. Clara Vaughn had worked her way up from nothing. He knew that much from her company bio. Started as a junior analyst at 22, made VP by 28, launched her own firm at 30. It was the kind of success story that made business magazines salivate. But reading between the lines now, Daniel saw what he'd missed before. How lonely that climb must have been. How many times she'd probably pushed past her own breaking point with no one to catch her. He wrote back, "Thank you. Not for the time off. For seeing me." This time the response took longer. "You're hard not to see, Daniel." His heart did something complicated in his chest. Emma stirred beside him, mumbling in her sleep. Daniel set the phone down and pressed his hand to her forehead, still warm, but better. "Daddy?" Her eyes opened, glassy with fever. "Right here, baby." "I had a dream about Mommy." Daniel's throat tightened. "Yeah? What about?" "She was singing. The song she used to sing." Emma's voice was thin, fragile. "But I couldn't remember all the words." Daniel felt the familiar ache of grief mixed with inadequacy. He'd tried so hard to keep his wife's memory alive for Emma, but 3 years was a lifetime when you were 6. The details were fading, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "She loved you so much," Daniel whispered. "You know that, right?" "I know." Emma closed her eyes again. "Daddy?" "Yeah, sweetheart?" "I'm glad you were home to pick me up. You're always working." The words shouldn't have hurt. She wasn't accusing him, just stating a fact. But they did. They hurt because they were true. "I'm going to try to be home more," Daniel said. "I promise." "Okay." She was already drifting off again. "Love you." "Love you too, Em." His phone buzzed once more. "Clara, stop beating yourself up. I can hear it from here." Daniel almost laughed. "Telepathic now?" "Educated guess." "You're a chronic self-flagellator. It's obvious. That's not a thing. It absolutely is. And you're terrible at it. Your daughter is fine. You're a good father. Stop inventing reasons to feel guilty." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. So he went with honesty. "You're very different than I thought you were." "Disappointed?" "Confused." "But not disappointed." "Good. Confusion I can work with." There was something almost playful in the exchange now, something that felt dangerous and thrilling in equal measure. Daniel knew he should stop, should put the phone down and remember that this was his boss, that there were boundaries, that whatever was happening here could only end badly. but Emma was sleeping peacefully beside him for the first time in days. The apartment felt warm instead of suffocating, and for the first time in 3 years, Daniel didn't feel like he was drowning alone in the middle of an endless ocean. Someone had thrown him a lifeline, and he was too tired, too grateful, too human to let go. The whispers started small, the way poison usually does. Daniel noticed it first in the break room 2 weeks after Clara had restructured his schedule. Conversations that stopped mid-sentence when he walked in, eyes that tracked him with calculation instead of curiosity. The subtle shift in how people said his name, like they were testing the weight of it, looking for hidden meanings. He tried to ignore it, tried to focus on his work, on Emma, on the fact that for the first time in years he was sleeping more than 4 hours a night and actually eating lunch instead of surviving on coffee and anxiety. Clara's policy changes had gone into effect company-wide, and 7 other employees were now working modified schedules. It should have normalized everything, but it didn't, because none of those 7 employees were texting Clara at night about their kids. None of them had her personal cell number, and none of them received the kind of subtle, careful attention that Clara had started directing at Daniel when she thought no one was watching. It was nothing overt, nothing anyone could point to as proof of impropriety, just small things. The way Clara's voice softened fractionally when she said his name, how she asked about Emma every morning, genuine concern in her eyes, the fact that she'd started keeping granola bars in her desk drawer, the specific brand Daniel liked, and would hand him one without comment when he looked tired. Individually, the gestures were innocent. Collectively, they painted a picture that the office gossip mill was all too happy to interpret. Sarah Chen cornered him on a Wednesday afternoon, her expression apologetic but urgent. "We need to talk," she said, practically dragging him into an empty conference room. "What's wrong?" Sarah closed the door, lowered her voice. "HR received a formal complaint about you yesterday." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What kind of complaint?" "The anonymous kind. Someone reported that you're receiving preferential treatment due to an inappropriate relationship with Clara." The words hit like a physical blow. "That's insane. There's no relationship. I know that. You know that. But Daniel, you have to see how this looks." Sarah pulled out her phone, showed him an email chain she'd been forwarded. "This has been circulating since Monday. People are keeping track. Your modified hours. The company policy that conveniently benefits you. The fact that Clara personally approved your time off when Emma was sick." "She approved everyone's time off. But she doesn't text everyone at 9 p.m. to check on their kids," Sarah said gently. "Jenna from IT saw the messages on your screen last week when she was fixing your computer." Daniel felt heat rise in his face. The messages with Clara had become routine, almost comfortable. Brief exchanges about Emma's school project, her art class, whether the fever had come back. Nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate, but undeniably personal. "We're friends," Daniel said, hearing how weak it sounded. "Clara Vaughn doesn't have friends. She has employees and competitors, that's it." Sarah's expression was sympathetic but serious. "Look, I don't care what's actually happening between you two, but other people do, and Hendricks is using it to undermine Clara's authority." "What do you mean?" "He's been telling people that Clara's gone soft, that she's letting personal feelings compromise her judgment. He's building a case to present to the board about leadership concerns." Sarah paused. "And your Exhibit A?" Daniel sat down heavily, his mind racing. He'd been so focused on the relief of having support, of not drowning alone anymore, that he hadn't considered the broader implications. "What do I do?" he asked. "Honestly, pull back, way back. Make it crystal clear that your relationship with Clara is purely professional. No more texts, no more personal conversations, nothing that anyone can misconstrue." The suggestion made something in Daniel's chest constrict painfully. The thought of returning to that isolated, desperate state he'd been in before Clara had seen him, really seen him, felt impossible. But the alternative was destroying her career. "Okay," Daniel said quietly. "I'll handle it." Sarah squeezed his shoulder. "I'm sorry. I know this sucks." After she left, Daniel sat alone in the conference room, staring at his phone. The last message from Clara was from this morning. How did Emma's presentation go? He'd responded with a picture of Emma holding her solar system project, beaming with pride. Clara had sent back a simple, "She's brilliant, like her father." 4 words that had made Daniel smile for the rest of the morning. Now they felt like evidence in a case he hadn't realized was being built. Daniel deleted the message thread. Then, hating himself for it, he deleted Clara's personal number from his contacts. When he returned to his desk, there was a note on his keyboard in Clara's precise handwriting. "My office, 4 p.m. His heart sank. She knew. Of course she knew. Clara knew everything that happened in this building. At exactly 4 o'clock, Daniel knocked on her door. "Come in." Clara was standing at the window, her back to him, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. She didn't turn around when he entered. "Close the door," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Daniel did, then waited. "I received an interesting call from Janet in HR today," Clara continued, still facing the window. "Apparently there's been a complaint. About us." "I heard." "Did you also hear that Marcus Hendricks has scheduled a meeting with 3 board members for Friday to discuss concerns about my leadership decisions?" Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. "No, I didn't know that." "Of course you didn't, because you're not the problem here, Daniel. I am." Clara turned finally, and the look on her face was more complex than Daniel had ever seen. Anger, yes, but also something that looked like regret. "I made you a target by caring too much, by showing you consideration I haven't shown anyone else. You were being human. I was being selfish." Clara's voice went hard. "I told myself I was implementing sound business practices, creating sustainable working conditions. But the truth is, I did it because I couldn't stand watching you destroy yourself. And that was personal, not professional." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications neither had been willing to name until now. "There's nothing inappropriate happening," Daniel said firmly. "We've never crossed any lines." "Lines?" Clara repeated, something bitter in her tone. "We've been dancing along the line for weeks, Daniel. Don't pretend you haven't noticed." He had noticed. Of course he had. The way his pulse jumped when she said his name. How he found excuses to stay late, even with his modified schedule, just to exchange a few more words with her at the end of the day. The fact that he thought about her at night, wondered what she was doing, whether she was alone in that enormous penthouse apartment she lived in. "Nothing has happened," Daniel insisted, "and nothing will happen. If you need me to resign, don't." The word came out sharp, almost desperate. Clara caught herself, visibly pulling back to composure. "Don't offer that, not yet." "Then what do you want me to do?" Clara was quiet for a long moment, her dark eyes searching his face like she was trying to memorize it. "I want you to pretend the last 3 weeks didn't happen," she said finally. "I want you to go back to being just my assistant, professional distance, no personal conversations, no texts about Emma, no—" Her voice caught slightly. "No friendship." The word landed like a punch, because that's what it had become, hadn't it? Friendship. Maybe the beginning of something more, if they'd been different people in different circumstances. "If that's what you need," Daniel said, his throat tight, "it's what I need to protect you, and to protect my company." Clara moved to her desk, her movements precise and controlled. "The board is already looking for reasons to question my judgment. I won't hand them ammunition." "So we just stop? Completely?" "Completely," Clara confirmed, though something in her eyes contradicted the certainty in her voice. "Effective immediately, you'll report to Janet for all non-critical matters. Your schedule remains modified, but I won't be personally overseeing your hours, and any communication between us will be strictly professional and documented through official channels only." It was logical, necessary even, but it felt like losing something Daniel hadn't realized he needed until it was being taken away. "Understood," he said. Clara nodded once, her expression unreadable. "You can go." Daniel turned toward the door, then stopped. He knew he shouldn't say anything else, knew that every word was just making this harder, but he couldn't leave without at least trying to push back against the unfairness of it all. "For what it's worth," he said, without turning around, "you're not selfish. You're the first person in 3 years who's treated me like I matter beyond my productivity metrics. That's not something to apologize for." He left before Clara could respond, before he could see whether his words had landed or simply made everything worse. The next 3 weeks were torture. Daniel maintained perfect professional distance. He communicated with Clara only through email, each message carefully worded and copied to relevant department heads. When they passed in the hallway, he nodded politely and kept walking. In meetings, he took notes without commentary, provided requested information without elaboration, and left the moment he was dismissed. It was everything the office gossips wanted to see, proof that whatever inappropriate relationship they'd imagined had been corrected. But it was killing him. Not because he couldn't function without Clara's attention, he'd functioned alone for years, but because he'd gotten a glimpse of what it felt like to be supported, to be seen, to matter to someone beyond transactional value. And having that taken away felt like losing something essential he hadn't known he was missing. Emma noticed the change, too. She asked why he seemed sad all the time, why he stopped smiling at his phone, why he was distracted even when they were playing together. Daniel told her he was tired. It was easier than explaining that he was grieving a relationship that had never technically existed. Meanwhile, the office dynamics shifted in ways that made Daniel's skin crawl. Hendricks started treating him with false sympathy, like Daniel was a cautionary tale about getting too close to power. Other executives ignored him entirely, as if he'd become invisible now that Clara's protection had been visibly withdrawn. And Clara herself had transformed back into the Ice Queen the company had always known. She was brilliant, demanding, and absolutely untouchable. If she was suffering from the enforced distance, she showed no sign of it. Until the Friday morning, everything fell apart. Daniel arrived at work to find an envelope on his desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a summons to appear before the board of directors at 2 p.m. that afternoon to answer questions regarding workplace conduct and professional boundaries. His hands shook as he read it. This was it. They were going after him directly now, trying to substantiate the rumors with official testimony. He should tell Clara. She deserved to know what was happening, but their communication protocols meant he'd have to schedule a meeting through Janet, wait for approval, document the request. By the time he got in to see her, the board meeting would already be underway. So Daniel made a decision. At 1:45 p.m., he walked past Janet's desk, ignored her protests, and knocked directly on Clara's door. "Mr. Brooks, you can't," Janet started. The door opened. Clara stood there, her expression flickering from surprise to concern to carefully controlled neutrality in the space of a second. "We had an agreement," she said coldly. "I know, I'm breaking it. I need 5 minutes." Clara glanced at Janet, who looked torn between protocol and self-preservation. "It's fine, Janet, 5 minutes." She stepped aside, let Daniel in, closed the door. "This better be important," Clara said, but her voice had lost some of its edge. Daniel handed her the summons, watched her face as she read it, saw the muscle in her jaw tighten with anger. "Those bastards," she breathed. "They're going after you directly. I thought you should know before I go in there." "You're not going in there." Clara's voice was steel. "I'll handle this." "You can't. If you intervene, it just proves their point about favoritism." "I don't care." "I do." Daniel cut her off, surprised by the strength in his own voice. "Clara, I care about your reputation, about this company, about everything you've built. I won't let them destroy it because of me." Something shifted in Clara's expression. The mask cracked just slightly, and Daniel saw raw emotion underneath, fear, anger, and something that looked heartbreakingly like desperation. "What are you going to tell them?" she asked quietly. "The truth. That you implemented policy changes to prevent employee burnout. That you treated me with basic human decency. That there's been nothing inappropriate between us." "They'll twist it, make it sound like more than it was." "Then let them," Daniel said. "I know what happened. You know what happened. That's all that matters." Clara stepped closer, close enough that Daniel could smell her perfume, see the tiny stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. "You don't understand what you're walking into," she said. "Hendricks has been planning this. He wants me out, and you're his leverage. So I'll remove the leverage. I'll resign, effective immediately." "No!" The word came out fierce, almost violent. "No, Daniel. You're not sacrificing your career because I couldn't keep professional distance. You kept it. I'm the one who pushed, who texted you first about Emma, who asked for your personal number. The lies came easily, smoothly, because they protected her. If anyone crossed the line, it was me. That's not true. It is true. Daniel held her gaze. And that's what I'm going to tell the board. That I misinterpreted your kindness as something more. That I made you uncomfortable with inappropriate personal communication. That you handled it correctly by reinstating professional boundaries. They'll fire you. Probably, but they'll leave you alone. Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. I won't let you do this. You don't have a choice. Daniel pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. The resignation letter he'd written at 2 a.m. when he couldn't sleep, when he'd finally accepted what needed to happen. I'm walking into that board meeting and I'm falling on my sword. And there's nothing you can do to stop me. He turned toward the door. Clara grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Daniel, please, don't. It was the please that almost broke him. Clara Vaughn didn't say please, didn't beg, didn't show weakness. But she was showing it now, and it was destroying them both. I have to, Daniel said softly. Because if I don't, they'll keep coming after you, and I can't watch that happen. Why not? Why do you care so much about protecting me? The question hung between them, demanding an answer Daniel had been avoiding for weeks. Because somewhere between collapsing on your shoulder and you asking about my daughter's fever, I started caring about you, Daniel said, the truth spilling out before he could stop it. Not as my boss, as a person, as someone who matters to me in ways that terrify me. And I know that's inappropriate. I know it crosses every professional boundary that exists. But it's the truth. Clara's eyes widened, her breath catching. So I'm going to walk into that board meeting, Daniel continued, and I'm going to lie. I'm going to tell them I misread signals and made you uncomfortable and that you handled it perfectly, because that's what protects you. And protecting you matters more to me than keeping this job. Daniel, don't, he said gently. Please don't make this harder than it already is. He pulled his arm free from her grip, opened the door, and walked out before she could say anything else. Janet looked up as he passed, her expression sympathetic. Mr. Brooks? It's fine, Janet. Everything's fine. It wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. But Daniel had spent 3 years protecting Emma from a world that wanted to break her. He knew how to take hits meant for someone else. This was just one more. The boardroom was smaller than Daniel expected, with a long mahogany table and 6 executives sitting in judgment. Marcus Hendricks sat at the far end, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Daniel took the single empty chair facing them all and waited. Mr. Brooks, said the woman in the center, Patricia Cho, board chair. Thank you for coming. We have some questions regarding your working relationship with Ms. Vaughn. Of course. There have been allegations of favoritism and inappropriate conduct. We'd like to hear your perspective. Daniel took a breath, preparing to deliver the lies that would save Clara's career and end his own. Then the door opened. Clara walked in, her spine rigid, her expression absolutely lethal. This meeting is over, she said. Patricia blinked. Excuse me? I said this meeting is over. Mr. Brooks will not be answering any questions. This entire inquiry is a transparent attempt by Marcus Hendricks to undermine my leadership, and I won't dignify it with cooperation. Hendricks leaned forward. Clara, if you have nothing to hide— Oh, I have plenty to hide, Marcus, including the fact that you've been embezzling from the Meridian account for 6 months. Clara dropped a folder on the table. Forensic accounting pulled these yesterday. Care to explain the discrepancies? The room went silent. Hendricks' face drained of color. You can't prove— I can prove everything, down to the wire transfers and shell companies. What I can't prove, yet, is whether the rest of the board knew about it. Clara's gaze swept the room like a blade. So here's what's going to happen. This inquiry into Mr. Brooks ends immediately. Marcus resigns effective today, and we all pretend this meeting never happened. You can't make demands of the board, Patricia said, though her voice lacked conviction. I own 42% of this company. I absolutely can make demands. Clara's voice was ice. Now, are we done here, or do I need to call the SEC? The board members exchanged glances. Hendricks looked like he might be sick. We're done, Patricia said finally. Excellent. Clara turned to Daniel. Mr. Brooks, my office. Now. She walked out without waiting for a response. Daniel followed, his mind reeling. The board members' voices erupted behind them, but Clara didn't slow down. She walked straight to her office, gestured Daniel inside, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Then she rounded on him, her eyes blazing. Don't you ever, she said, her voice shaking with fury, ever sacrifice yourself for me again. Clara, you were going to lie to them, fall on your sword, destroy your career to protect mine. Yes, Daniel said simply. I was. Why? The word came out almost anguished. Why would you do that? I told you why. In your office 5 minutes ago. Clara stared at him, her chest rising and falling with emotion barely contained. You care about me. Yes. As more than your boss. Yes. That's... Clara stopped, seemed to be struggling with something. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Despite everything, Daniel almost laughed. Probably. I'm difficult. I'm controlling. I have no idea how to be in a relationship. I haven't dated anyone seriously in 8 years because I can't turn off my brain long enough to be vulnerable. I know. And you're a single father with a 6-year-old daughter who needs stability, not her dad getting involved with his emotionally unavailable boss. I know that too. So this can't happen, Clara said, but she was moving closer as she said it. It's a terrible idea. It violates every professional boundary. It would be complicated and messy and probably end badly. Agreed, Daniel whispered. They were inches apart now, close enough that Daniel could see the gold flecks in Clara's dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating from her body. So we're not doing this, Clara said. We're not. We're going to maintain professional distance. Absolutely. Starting right now. Right now, Daniel echoed. Neither of them moved. Clara's hand came up, trembling slightly, and touched Daniel's face. Just the lightest brush of fingertips against his jaw, but it sent electricity through his entire body. I can't stop thinking about you, she whispered. I've tried. For 3 weeks I've tried to go back to how things were before, but I can't, because you're in my head and I don't know how to get you out. I don't want you to get me out. This is insane. Completely insane. We could lose everything. I know. Clara's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that this was one-sided. She wouldn't find it, because Daniel had already made his choice when he'd walked into that board meeting ready to burn his career to ash if it meant protecting her. If we do this, Clara said slowly, it has to be right. No hiding, no sneaking around. We disclose everything, follow every protocol, accept every consequence. Okay? And Emma comes first. Always. If this affects her negatively in any way, we stop. Immediately. The fact that Clara's first concern was for his daughter made Daniel's chest ache with something too big to name. Okay, he said again. I'm serious, Daniel. I won't be the reason your daughter's life gets complicated. You won't be. You're... He stopped, trying to find words for what Clara had become to him. You're the reason I'm not drowning anymore. That matters. Clara's hand was still on his face, her thumb tracing the line of his cheekbone. I'm terrified, she admitted. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. That simple? That's simple. Clara laughed, the sound rough and a little broken. Nothing about this is simple. No, Daniel agreed. But it's worth it. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, like she was testing the reality of it. Daniel's hands came up to her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying at the same time. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. We're going to have to tell HR, she said. I know. And restructure your reporting chain. I know. And probably endure months of gossip and speculation. Worth it, Daniel said firmly. Clara pulled back slightly, studying his face. You're sure? Because there's still time to pretend this didn't happen, to go back to professional distance and safe boundaries. Daniel thought about the past 3 weeks, the hollow feeling of going through motions without meaning, the way Emma had asked why he was sad, the crushing weight of being alone even in a crowded room. Then he thought about this moment. Clara's hands on him, her eyes clear and certain despite her admission of fear. The way she'd walked into that board meeting ready to burn her own bridges to protect him. "I'm sure," he said. Clara nodded once, then stepped back, her professional mask sliding into place with practiced ease. But her eyes stayed soft, stayed his. "Then let's do this right," she said. "Monday morning, we meet with HR together. Full disclosure. We'll restructure so there's no conflict of interest, and we'll deal with whatever consequences come." "Together," Daniel confirmed. "Together." It was a promise, a commitment. The beginning of something neither of them fully understood, but both were willing to fight for. As Daniel left Clara's office, he passed Janet's desk. She looked up, started to say something, then just smiled knowingly. The gossip mill would explode by end of day. The board would have questions. Hendricks would probably try one last desperate move before his inevitable resignation. But for the first time in 3 years, Daniel wasn't afraid of the storm, because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Daniel spent the weekend preparing Emma for a conversation he had no idea how to have. Saturday morning, while she was painting at the kitchen table, her latest obsession was watercolor sunsets, he tried to find the words. How did you explain to a 6-year-old that her father's boss might become something more? That their carefully constructed world of just the two of them might expand to include someone else? "Daddy, you're staring," Emma said without looking up from her painting. "Sorry, sweetheart, just thinking." "About what?" "About how much I love you." Emma finally looked up, her expression suspicious in the way only a perceptive child could manage. "You're using your weird voice." "What weird voice?" "The one you use when you're trying to tell me something I won't like. Like when you said we couldn't get a puppy." Daniel couldn't help but smile. His daughter was too smart for her own good. "It's not bad news," he said carefully. "It's just different news." Emma set down her paintbrush, giving him her full attention. "Okay." Daniel sat across from her, suddenly aware of how monumental this moment was. After her mother died, it had been just them against the world. No other family, no romantic interests, just Daniel and Emma surviving together. "You know how I work for Ms. Vaughn?" he started. Emma nodded. "The scary lady who sent you home when you were tired." "She's not scary, she's just intense." "That's what grown-ups say when they mean scary." "Fair point." "Well," Daniel continued, "Ms. Vaughn and I have become friends, good friends. And sometimes, when adults are good friends, they spend time together outside of work too." Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. "Like dating?" The directness caught Daniel off guard. Yes, like dating. Maybe. If that's something you'd be okay with." "Do you like her?" "I do." "Does she like you?" "She does." Emma considered this, her small face serious. "Does she like me?" The question hit Daniel in the chest. Of course, that's what Emma would worry about. Every relationship in her short life had been defined by loss. Her mother, her grandparents who died before she was born, even her father's constant absence at work had probably felt like another kind of leaving. "She doesn't know you yet," Daniel said honestly. "But she wants to. She asks about you all the time, about your paintings and your school projects and what makes you laugh." "She does?" "She does. And I think if you gave her a chance, you might like her too." Emma picked up her paintbrush again, adding careful strokes of orange to her sunset. "Will she try to be my mom?" Daniel's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart. No one could ever replace your mom. Ms. Vaughn knows that." "Good. Because I still love Mommy, even if I don't remember her very much." "I know you do, and that's okay. Loving your mom doesn't mean you can't care about other people too. Love doesn't run out." Emma was quiet for a long moment, focused on her painting. Then, without looking up, "Is she nice to you?" "Very nice." "Does she make you smile?" Daniel thought about Clara's rare smiles, the way her whole face transformed when she let her guard down, the way she'd touched his face in her office, terrified and brave at the same time. "Yes," he said. "She makes me smile." "Then I guess it's okay." Emma added a final stroke of purple to her sky. But if she's mean to you, I'll tell her to go away. I'm good at being scary, too. Daniel laughed, pulling Emma into a hug she only partially resisted. I believe you. Can I meet her? Eventually, we're taking things slow. Because of me? Because we want to do this right. For everyone. Emma seemed to accept this. She went back to her painting, and Daniel watched her, marveling at her resilience. This small person who'd lost so much and still found ways to be open to new possibilities. His phone buzzed. A text from Clara. How's your weekend? They'd agreed to keep communication minimal until after the Monday HR meeting, but apparently Clara was struggling with that as much as Daniel was. Good. Had a talk with Emma about us. The response came quickly. And? She wants to make sure you're nice to me. Says she'll tell you to go away if you're mean. Smart kid. I like her already. Daniel smiled at the screen, then typed, She said it's okay. If you make me smile. Do I? You know you do. Good. That's good. There was something vulnerable in those words, in the hesitation behind them. Clara, who commanded boardrooms and demolished competitors without blinking, unsure of her ability to make one person happy. I'm nervous about tomorrow, Clara wrote. What if HR says we can't do this? Then we figure out a different way. But we're not walking away from this. You're very certain for someone who's known me for less than 2 months. I've known you long enough to know what matters. This matters. The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before Clara's response came through. I'm not good at this. At relationships? At being vulnerable. I'm going to mess this up. Probably. I'll mess it up too. We'll figure it out together. You keep saying that because it's true. Clara, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here. There was a long pause. Then, I'm not used to people wanting me for anything other than what I can do for them. Daniel's chest ached reading those words. I want you because of who you are. Everything else is just context. Daniel Brooks, are you trying to make me cry in the middle of Whole Foods? Despite the levity, Daniel could picture her exactly, standing in some produce aisle, phone in hand, struggling with emotions she'd probably spent years learning to suppress. Where you are is less important than the fact that you're feeling something. That's good. It's terrifying, also good. Means it matters. It does. More than I expected. Daniel glanced at Emma, still painting contentedly. I should go, but I'll see you tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. HR. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it. He set the phone down and found Emma watching him with knowing eyes. You're smiling, she said. I am. Because of Ms. Vaughn? Yeah. Emma nodded sagely, like she'd just confirmed a hypothesis. Okay, you can keep her. If only it were that simple. Monday morning arrived with the weight of consequence. Daniel dressed carefully, dropping Emma at school early with promises to pick her up on time. She hugged him extra tight at drop-off. Good luck with the scary lady, she whispered. She's not scary anymore, Daniel whispered back. She's a little scary, Emma insisted. Then with the brutal honesty of 6-year-olds, but maybe that's okay. You like scary movies too. The Vaughn Industries lobby felt different somehow, like Daniel was seeing it through new eyes. He'd walked through these doors hundreds of times, but never knowing that his entire professional future was about to be decided in a single meeting. Clara was already waiting outside the HR conference room when Daniel arrived. She looked immaculate as always, charcoal suit, dark hair pulled back, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped in irregular rhythm against her tablet. Morning, he said quietly. You're 2 minutes early. So are you. Clara's mouth twitched in something almost like a smile. Nervous? Terrified. You? Absolutely. She glanced at him, her expression softening. But we're doing this. We're doing this. The door opened. Janet stood there, her professional smile firmly in place, but her eyes were kind. Ms. Vaughn, Mr. Brooks, come in. Inside, the conference room held 3 people. Janet took a seat at the head of the table. Beside her sat Martin Chen from legal, no relation to Sarah, but equally sharp, and Patricia Cho, the board chair from Friday's disastrous meeting. Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd expected HR. He hadn't expected the board. Clara's hand brushed against his for just a second, a brief touch of reassurance before they both sat down. "Thank you for coming," Janet began. "I know this is unusual, having board representation at an HR meeting, but given the circumstances and the roles involved, we felt it was appropriate." "Appropriate," Clara repeated, her voice cool. "Or a continuation of Friday's inquisition." Patricia had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Friday was poorly handled. Marcus Hendricks has resigned and his actions are being investigated separately. This meeting is about ensuring we handle your situation correctly and fairly." "Our situation," Clara said, "is that Daniel and I have developed feelings for each other outside of our professional relationship. We're here to disclose that and request guidance on how to proceed while maintaining appropriate workplace boundaries." The directness of it seemed to surprise everyone except Daniel. This was Clara. She didn't hedge or soften. She stated facts and demanded solutions. Janet nodded slowly. "Can you characterize the nature of your relationship currently?" "We're not in a relationship yet," Daniel said. "We wanted to address the potential conflict of interest before anything progressed further." "That's admirably proactive," Martin said, making notes. "When did romantic feelings develop?" Clara and Daniel exchanged glances. Clara spoke first. "For me, it began when Mr. Brooks collapsed from exhaustion 3 weeks ago, and I realized I'd been complicit in creating an unsustainable work environment. I began to see him as a person rather than just an employee." "And for you, Mr. Brooks?" Daniel thought about the moment his head had touched Clara's shoulder, the way she'd held steady instead of pushing him away. "Around the same time. When Ms. Vaughn showed me consideration I didn't expect and helped me understand I didn't have to survive alone." The room was quiet for a moment. Janet made several notes before looking up. "Has there been any physical relationship?" she asked. "We kissed. Once. Friday afternoon," Clara said. "After the board meeting, that's all." "And prior to that?" "Nothing physical. Text messages about Mr. Brooks's daughter, personal conversations in my office. Nothing inappropriate, but definitely personal." Patricia leaned forward. "Ms. Vaughn, you understand that as CEO, your relationships with subordinates carry significant liability for the company?" "I'm aware." Clara's voice went hard. "I'm also aware that consenting adults are entitled to personal lives. We're here to do this correctly, not to be punished for having feelings." "No one's suggesting punishment," Janet said quickly, "but we do need to address the power dynamic. Daniel reports directly to you. That creates an inherent imbalance." "Which is why we're proposing a restructure," Clara said. "Daniel would report to Janet directly for all administrative matters. I would retain oversight of strategic initiatives, but his day-to-day supervision and performance reviews would be handled by HR." Martin looked impressed. "You've already thought this through." "I've thought of little else all weekend," Clara admitted. "Daniel is an exceptional assistant, but he's wasted in that role. I'd like to promote him to Senior Operations Coordinator. He'd work across departments on project integration and efficiency initiatives, still supporting executive functions, but not exclusively mine." Daniel stared at her. They hadn't discussed this. Claire was not only removing the conflict of interest, she was advancing his career in the process. "That's a significant promotion," Patricia noted. "How do we ensure it's merit-based and not influenced by your personal feelings?" "His performance reviews for the past 18 months speak for themselves," Clara said crisply. "Daniel has consistently exceeded expectations in every metric. He's identified cost-saving measures totaling over $2 million. He's streamlined communication protocols across 7 departments. He's earned this promotion regardless of our personal situation." Janet nodded. "Mr. Brooks, do you have anything to add?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Just that I want to make sure this is handled transparently. I don't want anyone thinking I'm getting preferential treatment. If the promotion requires a formal interview process or competition with other candidates, I'm willing to do that." "That won't be necessary," Patricia said, "but we will require quarterly performance reviews for the first year, conducted by Janet and an independent board member, just to ensure objectivity." "Acceptable," Daniel said. "Additionally," Martin added, "you'll both need to sign relationship disclosure agreements. If the relationship ends, you'll need to notify HR within 48 hours. And if any concerns arise about favoritism or inappropriate conduct, We'll need to investigate immediately. Understood, Clara said. Janet looked between them, her expression thoughtful. I have to ask, are you both certain this is what you want? There are simpler paths. One of you could transfer to another company, or you could simply maintain professional boundaries and not pursue this. We could, Clara agreed, but we're not going to. Why not? For the first time all meeting, Clara seemed uncertain. Her eyes found Daniel's, and something passed between them, an understanding of everything they'd already survived to get to this moment. Because I've spent 15 years building this company at the expense of everything else, Clara said quietly. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, anything that might make me vulnerable or distracted, and I've been successful by every measurable standard. But I've also been alone. She paused, her voice steadier now. Daniel showed me that I don't have to choose between excellence and humanity, that caring about someone doesn't make me weak, it makes me better, and I'm not willing to walk away from that just because it's complicated. Daniel felt something tight in his chest loosen. Claire had never been this honest, this exposed, especially not in front of witnesses. Janet smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her professional demeanor. Then let's make this work. We'll process the promotion paperwork this week. Daniel, you'll transition to your new role over the next 2 weeks. Clara, you'll need to identify a new assistant. Already done. Sarah Chen from accounting has been interested in an executive role. I'll interview her this afternoon. Of course, Clara already had a plan. Daniel wouldn't have expected anything less. Good, Janet said. Then unless there are other concerns, I think we're done here. Congratulations, Mr. Brooks, on your promotion. And to both of you. She paused, her expression knowing. Good luck. You're going to need it. They left the conference room together, walking in silence until they reached the elevator bank. The doors opened to an empty car. They stepped inside, and as soon as the doors closed, Clara's shoulders sagged slightly. That was terrifying, she breathed. You were incredible. I meant every word about you making me better. Daniel wanted to kiss her right there, but the elevator had cameras. Instead, he settled for, I know. That's what made it incredible. The doors opened on 42. They stepped out into the familiar hallway, but everything felt different now, changed, like they'd crossed some invisible threshold and couldn't go back. I should get started on the transition plan, Daniel said. The new role will require… Daniel! Clara stopped him with a hand on his arm. Tonight, come to dinner, you and Emma, at my place. His heart stuttered. You want to meet Emma? I want to start doing this right, which means she needs to know I'm not just your boss, that I'm… Clara trailed off, searching for words. That I'm someone who cares about her father very much. She's 6 and protective, and she might ask you 100 questions about your intentions. Good. I'd be worried if she didn't. Claire's expression softened. I know this is fast, but we've already wasted 3 weeks being miserable apart. I don't want to waste any more time. Daniel thought about Emma's words from Saturday. If she makes you smile, it's okay. 7 o'clock? He asked. 7 o'clock. I'll order something child-friendly. What does she like? Pizza, mac and cheese, anything involving cheese, really. Clara smiled, and it transformed her entire face. I can work with that. They stood there for another moment, just looking at each other, before Daniel forced himself to step back. I should get to work. I have about 500 emails to sort through for the transition. I'll send you the new org chart by noon. Of course you will. Clara turned toward her office, then looked back. Daniel, thank you for being willing to fight for this, for us. There was never any question, he said simply. The rest of the day passed in a blur of logistics and planning. Sarah Chen accepted the assistant position with barely contained excitement. The org chart Clara sent was ruthlessly efficient, restructuring 3 departments to accommodate Daniel's new role while maintaining clear reporting lines that eliminated any conflict of interest. By 5 o'clock, Daniel's head was spinning with new responsibilities and possibilities. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's after-school program. Emma's ready for pickup. He grabbed his coat, said goodbye to Sarah, and headed for the elevator. Clara was just stepping out of her office as he passed. See you at 7, she said quietly. 7, Daniel confirmed. Then, because the hallway was empty and he couldn't resist, Don't be nervous. She's gonna love you. I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I don't get nervous. You're absolutely terrified right now. Clara's lips twitched. Completely terrified, but still doing it. That's all that matters. Daniel picked up Emma, who chattered the entire drive home about her day, the art project she'd finished, the boy who'd pushed her on the swings, the fact that her teacher said her reading was getting really good. He let her talk, soaking in the normalcy of it while his mind raced ahead to dinner. We're going to Mrs. Vaughn's house tonight, he said when Emma finally paused for breath. Her eyes went wide. Tonight? Like right now, tonight? In about an hour. She wants to meet you properly. Emma was quiet, processing. Should I bring my painting, the sunset one? If you want to. I want to. It's my best one. She paused. Will she like it? She'll love it, sweetheart, just like I love it. At home, Emma insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple, with small stars, and carefully wrapped her painting in a folder. Daniel changed into jeans and a button-down, trying not to think too hard about the fact that he was bringing his daughter to meet the woman who'd somehow become essential to his happiness in the span of 6 weeks. Clara's address led them to a high-rise overlooking the river. The penthouse, naturally. Daniel gave his name to the doorman, who nodded like he'd been expecting them, and directed them to a private elevator. Emma clutched his hand in the elevator, her painting folder tucked under her other arm. Daddy, what if she doesn't like me? Daniel knelt down, meeting her eyes. That's impossible. You're brilliant and brave and the best person I know. If she doesn't see that immediately, then she's not as smart as I think she is. But what if Emma, look at me. He waited until she focused. The only thing that matters to me is that you're happy and safe. If tonight doesn't feel right, we leave. No questions. Okay? Emma nodded slowly. Okay. The elevator opened directly into Clara's apartment, a sprawling space of floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and the kind of ruthless organization Daniel recognized from her office. But there were also unexpected touches. Books everywhere. A telescope by the window. What looked like a half-finished puzzle on a side table. Clara stood in the open living area, wearing jeans and a soft sweater instead of her usual armor of suits and heels. She looked younger somehow, less untouchable. Hi, she said, her eyes going straight to Emma. You must be Emma. Your dad's told me a lot about you. Emma stepped forward, suddenly brave. He talks about you too, says you're scary, but nice. Clara's laugh was startled and genuine. That's probably fair. Come in. I ordered pizza. Hope that's okay. Pizza's my favorite, Emma said, relaxing slightly. They moved into the living area. Emma spotted the puzzle and immediately gravitated toward it. You like puzzles? Clara asked. I'm really good at them. Daddy says I have a gift for seeing patterns. Me too. Want to help me finish this one? I've been stuck on the corner pieces. Emma nodded enthusiastically, setting her painting folder aside. Daniel watched as they sat together at the table, Emma explaining her puzzle strategy with complete seriousness, while Clara listened with genuine interest. There was something surreal about seeing these two parts of his life intersecting, his daughter and the woman who'd somehow slipped past every wall he'd built. After 20 minutes of puzzling, Emma suddenly looked up. I brought you something. She retrieved her folder, carefully pulling out the sunset painting. I made this. Daddy said you might like it. Clara took the painting with the kind of careful reverence usually reserved for museum pieces. Emma, this is beautiful. The colors are incredible. Purple's my favorite, and orange. They look good together. They really do. Clara looked at Daniel, something soft in her expression. Would you be okay if I hung this up? I have a perfect spot by the window. Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? Best art my apartment's ever seen. While Clara found tape and hung the painting with Emma's careful direction, Daniel's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. The office is already gossiping about your promotion. Fair warning. He showed it to Clara when Emma was distracted arranging the painting's exact position. Let them talk, Clara said quietly. We've got nothing to hide. No regrets? Only that we wasted 3 weeks being miserable when we could have been here. She glanced at Emma, who was now examining the telescope. This, right here, this is worth every complicated conversation we'll have to have. Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Emma asked Clara approximately 73 questions ranging from, do you have any pets, to what's the biggest number you know, to why do you like my dad? Clara answered every single one with patience and honesty. I don't have pets, but I've been thinking about getting a cat. The biggest number I know is infinity, which isn't technically a number, but it's still the biggest. And I like your dad because he's kind and smart, and he makes me want to be a better person. Emma considered this, then nodded. That's a good answer. After dinner, while Emma was absorbed in building a fort out of Clara's throw pillows, Clara and Daniel stood by the windows overlooking the city. She's amazing, Clara said quietly. You've done an incredible job. Most days it feels like I'm barely holding it together. Most days everyone feels like that. The difference is you're actually succeeding. Clara's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. Thank you for sharing her with me. I know how big that is. Daniel watched Emma laughing as her pillow fort collapsed, already rebuilding it with determined focus. She's the most important thing in my life, he said. If this doesn't work, if it affects her negatively, then we stop, Clara finished. I know, you've made that clear, but Daniel, I'm not planning on it not working. That's a lot of confidence for someone who admitted to being terrified of relationships. I'm not terrified of relationships. I'm terrified of failing at something that matters this much. She squeezed his hand. Big difference. Emma called from across the room. Daddy, Clara, come see my fort. Clara's face did something complicated at the sound of her first name in Emma's voice. Surprise and pleasure and something that looked almost like wonder. They spent the rest of the evening in Emma's pillow fort, reading stories and eating cookies until Emma's eyes started drooping. Daniel carried her to the car while Clara walked them down. At the elevator, Emma suddenly wrapped her arms around Clara's legs in an impulsive hug. I like you, she declared. You can keep dating my dad. Clara's eyes went suspiciously bright. Thank you. That means a lot. In the car on the way home, Emma was quiet until they were almost to the apartment. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? Clara's not like Mommy. Daniel's chest tightened. No, she's not. But that's okay, because Mommy's Mommy, and Clara's Clara. They're different. That's exactly right. I think Mommy would like her. The words hit Daniel with unexpected force. He had to blink hard against the sudden sting in his eyes. Yeah, baby. I think she would too. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat in his living room and let himself feel the full weight of what was happening. He was falling for Clara Vaughn, had maybe already fallen, and instead of destroying his carefully rebuilt life, it was making everything better. His phone buzzed. Clara, thank you for tonight. Emma's incredible. You're incredible. I don't say that enough. You say it plenty, in different ways. I'm not good at the relationship things, the words and gestures and knowing what to do. You hung her painting on your wall and listened to 17 minutes of puzzle strategy. You're doing fine. I want to do better than fine. I want to get this right. You already are. Just keep being you. There was a long pause before Clara's next message. I care about you, both of you, more than I thought I was capable of caring. I know. We care about you too. This is really happening. We're really doing this. We really are. And Clara? It's going to be okay. Better than okay. How do you know? Because we're choosing this. Together. That's all that matters. Daniel fell asleep with his phone in his hand, Clara's last message still on the screen. Together. I like the sound of that. For the first time in 3 years, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to look forward to. 3 months into his new role as senior operations coordinator, Daniel was sitting in a department head meeting when he felt it. The familiar creep of exhaustion that used to signal he was running on empty. But this time was different. This time he'd slept 7 hours the night before, had eaten an actual breakfast with Emma instead of grabbing coffee on the run. Had taken lunch at his desk, not because he was drowning in work, but because he'd chosen to finish a project proposal he was genuinely excited about. The exhaustion wasn't the bone-deep kind that came from survival mode. It was just normal human tiredness after a full day of meaningful work. Still, he felt his focus wavering as the meeting stretched into its second hour. Marcus Chen from Finance was presenting quarterly projections, and Daniel's notes were getting less detailed as his concentration slipped. He sensed movement beside him. Clara had shifted in her chair. She ran these meetings now that Daniel no longer reported directly to her, and her hand came to rest briefly on his shoulder. Just a moment of contact, subtle enough that anyone watching might think it was accidental, but Daniel felt the question in it. "You okay?" He nodded slightly. The hand withdrew. 10 minutes later, Clara wrapped up the meeting with her usual efficiency. "That's everything for today. Daniel, stay back a moment. I have questions about the Riverside integration timeline." It was their code, developed over months of learning how to navigate professional boundaries while building something personal. Questions about integration meant, "I want to check on you without making it obvious." The room cleared. Clara closed the door, then turned to face him, her expression shifting from CEO to something softer. "Truth," she said. "How are you?" "Tired, but good tired. Normal tired." "You sure? Because if the workload's too much..." "Clara." Daniel stood, moved closer to her. "I'm fine. I promise. This is what regular exhaustion feels like when you're not operating on a catastrophic sleep deficit." She studied his face, looking for signs of the kind of collapse that had started everything between them. Daniel let her look. He had nothing to hide anymore. "Okay," Clara said finally. "But if that changes, you'll be the first to know," he smiled. "Well, second, Emma has radar for when I'm struggling. She'll probably tell you before I do." Clara's expression melted into genuine warmth at the mention of Emma. Over the past 3 months, she'd become a steady presence in their lives. Sunday dinners, trips to the park, quiet evenings where Clara and Emma worked on puzzles while Daniel cooked. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just a gradual weaving together of lives that fit better than any of them had expected. "How is she doing with the school project?" Clara asked. "The ecosystem thing?" "Stressed. She's convinced her desert habitat isn't good enough because Tommy Morrison's dad helped him build some elaborate rainforest diorama." "Tommy Morrison's dad is also an architect with unlimited time and resources. That's not a fair comparison." "I told her that. She said life isn't fair and she needs to work harder." Clara winced. "That sounds like something I would say." "It is something you said last week. She's been quoting you." "Is that a problem?" Daniel considered this carefully. 3 months ago, the idea of Clara influencing his daughter would have terrified him. But watching them together, seeing how Clara listened to Emma with genuine interest, how she challenged her to think critically while still being age-appropriate, it wasn't replacement parenting, it was addition. "It's not a problem," Daniel said. "It's actually kind of amazing. She respects you, looks up to you. That matters." Clara's eyes went soft. "She's easy to respect back. She's brilliant and fearless, and she has this way of asking questions that make me reconsider everything I think I know." "Wonder where she gets that from?" "Definitely her father." They stood there in the empty conference room, close enough to touch but maintaining the professional distance they'd agreed on during work hours. It was harder some days than others. Daniel wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close, wanted to blur all the careful lines they'd drawn. But they'd made a commitment to do this right, and that meant waiting until they were truly off the clock. "Dinner tonight?" Clara asked. "I could help with the ecosystem project. I did my thesis on desert sustainability." "Of course you did." "It was relevant to water resource management in emerging markets." "Emma's doing a shoebox diorama with sand and plastic cacti." "Perfect. I'll bring my expertise in miniature desert construction." Daniel laughed. "You're ridiculous." "I'm helpful. There's a difference." Clara glanced at her watch. "I have a call with Tokyo in 5 minutes. See you at 6? 6, Daniel confirmed. She moved toward the door, then paused. "Daniel, I'm glad you're okay. That you're genuinely okay, not just pretending to be." "I know, me too." After she left, Daniel gathered his materials and headed back to his office. Not the small space adjacent to Clara's, but a proper office 2 floors down with his name on the door and a view of the city. Senior Operations Coordinator. It still felt surreal sometimes. Sarah Chen, now Clara's assistant and thriving in the role, was waiting by his desk when he arrived. "The integration report is ready for your review," she said, handing him a tablet. Also, Hendricks from Finance wants to schedule a meeting about the Q4 timeline. Different Hendricks, Daniel said quickly. Marcus Chen had informally been referred to as Hendricks for years before the real Hendricks had been ousted. It still made Daniel tense when he heard the name. Different Hendricks, Sarah confirmed with a knowing smile. The non-embezzling kind. The scandal for Marcus Hendricks' resignation had rocked the company for weeks, but Clara had handled it with characteristic precision, full transparency with the board, cooperation with investigators, and a company-wide memo about ethical standards that left no room for interpretation. The stock had dipped briefly, then recovered stronger than before. Daniel spent the rest of the afternoon in meetings and project reviews, the kind of strategic work he'd never imagined doing when he'd started as an assistant. He was good at it too, finding efficiencies, connecting departments, solving problems that required both analytical thinking and understanding people. Clara had been right about his abilities. He just needed the opportunity to use them. At 5:30, he packed up and headed out. No guilty feelings about leaving on time. No anxiety about unfinished work. Just a normal end to a productive day. He picked up Emma from after-school care, where she immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why her ecosystem project was doomed. Tommy's has actual running water, Dad. Actual water. How am I supposed to compete with that? You're not competing, you're learning about desert ecosystems. But Ms. Peterson is going to give Tommy an A because his look's professional. Or she's going to give you an A because you did the work yourself and can actually explain what you learned. Emma slumped in her car seat. I guess. Also, Clara's coming over tonight to help. She knows about deserts. Real deserts or fake diorama deserts? Both, actually. Emma perked up slightly. Okay, that's good. Clara's smart about stuff. They stopped at the grocery store for dinner ingredients. Clara had requested Daniel's pasta carbonara, which had somehow become her favorite meal, and arrived home at 5:45. Emma immediately spread her project materials across the dining table while Daniel started cooking. Clara arrived at exactly 6 o'clock with a bag from the craft store and an intensity that suggested she'd been planning desert diorama strategy all afternoon. I brought options, she announced, setting the bag on the table. Different sand textures, miniature succulents, and she pulled out a small package. These tiny lizard figurines because every desert ecosystem needs fauna. Emma's eyes went wide. Those are perfect. Right? I thought so too. Daniel watched from the kitchen as they dove into the project. Clara crouched beside Emma at the table, both of them completely absorbed in creating the most scientifically accurate shoebox desert possible. There was something about seeing Clara like this, hair coming loose from its usual perfect arrangement, gesturing animatedly about xerophytic adaptations, genuinely invested in a 6-year-old's homework, that made Daniel's chest feel too full. Dad, Emma called. Clara says barrel cacti can store up to 200 gallons of water. Is that true? If Clara says it, it's probably true. It is true, Clara confirmed. They're remarkable survival mechanisms, just like how you're remarkably good at understanding plant adaptations. Emma beamed. They worked on the project through dinner, carbonara eaten between discussions of rainfall patterns and temperature variations, until Emma's ecosystem was transformed from a basic shoebox of sand into something that actually looked educational and impressive. This is so much better, Emma said, admiring their work. Thank you, Clara. You did all the important parts. I just provided supplementary materials. That means she helped, Emma translated for Daniel's benefit. I got that, sweetheart. Emma yawned, the excitement of the project finally giving way to end-of-day tiredness. Can Clara read me a story before bed? The question was so casual, so natural, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. But Daniel saw Clara's expression shift, surprise and something deeper, more emotional. If that's okay with your dad, Clara said carefully. More than okay, Daniel assured her. 30 minutes later, after Emma had changed into pajamas and brushed her teeth, Daniel listened from the hallway as Clara read The Little Prince in Emma's room, a book they'd started last week and were working through chapter by chapter. Clara's voice was different when she read aloud, softer, less guarded. Daniel heard Emma interrupt with questions. Why is the prince sad? What's a boa constrictor? And Clara's patient answers. When the chapter ended, Daniel heard Emma say sleepily, "Clara, do you love my dad?" His heart stopped. There was a pause. Then Clara's voice, quiet but clear. "Yes, I do." "Good. He loves you too. He smiles at his phone all the time when you text him." Clara's laugh was soft. "Does he?" "All the time. It's kind of gross, but also kind of nice." "I think it's nice too." "Okay. Good night, Clara." "Good night, Emma." Daniel stepped back from the doorway as Clara emerged, pulling Emma's door mostly closed. In the hallway light, he could see her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You heard that," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah." "Should I have... was it okay that I said..." Daniel pulled her close, cutting off the anxious spiral with a kiss that had been building all day. Clara melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, 3 months of carefully maintained professional distance dissolving into this moment of complete honesty. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara rested her forehead against his. "I meant it," she whispered. "I love you. Both of you. I didn't plan to. I didn't think I was capable of it, but I do." "I love you too," Daniel said, the words feeling both monumental and incredibly simple. "Have for a while now. Just been waiting for the right moment to say it." "Was Emma asking me directly the right moment?" "Seems like it worked out." Clara laughed, the sound still slightly shaky. "She's terrifyingly perceptive. She gets that from her mother. Her mother was brilliant at reading people." It was the first time Daniel had brought up his late wife without pain tightening his chest. Clara went still, clearly unsure how to respond. "She would have liked you," Daniel continued, "would have appreciated how you challenge me, how you care about Emma, how you make us both better." "You don't have to. I know, but I want to." He pulled back slightly, meeting Clara's eyes. "You're not replacing anyone. You're not trying to be Emma's mother. You're just Clara, and that's exactly what we need." Clara's composure cracked completely. Tears spilled over, and she didn't try to hide them. "I was so scared I'd mess this up," she admitted, "that I'd be too rigid or too demanding or too much like I am at work. But with you and Emma, I get to be something different, someone softer, and I didn't know I needed that until I had it." Daniel wiped her tears gently. "You get to be all of it, CEO Clara and soft Clara and everything in between. We love all of you." They stood in the hallway, holding each other, until Clara's breathing steadied. Then they moved to the living room, curling up together on the couch in a way that still felt new and precious. "The office is still talking, you know," Clara said eventually. "About us." "Let them talk." "Janet told me there's a betting pool on how long we'll last." "What's the spread?" 6 months to 5 years. Apparently we're either a disaster waiting to happen or a fairy tale romance. "Which did you bet on?" Clara smiled against his shoulder. "I don't gamble. But if I did, I'd put money on forever." "That's a long time." "Is it too long?" "Not nearly long enough." They stayed like that until Daniel's phone alarm went off, his reminder to review Emma's homework folder for the next day. Clara reluctantly disentangled herself. "I should go. Let you do the parent thing. Or you could stay. Help with the homework folder. Maybe watch a movie after?" Clara hesitated, and Daniel could see the war playing out in her expression, the part of her that's still worried about moving too fast versus the part that wanted exactly what he was offering. "The guest room has clean sheets," Daniel added. "No pressure, just stay." "Okay," Clara said softly. "I'll stay." It became routine after that. Not every night, but several times a week. Clara would stay for dinner and bedtime stories and the quiet evening hours after Emma fell asleep. Sometimes they talked about work, sometimes about nothing important. Sometimes they just existed in comfortable silence. The office gossip gradually shifted from scandal to curiosity to, eventually, acceptance. Daniel proved himself in his new role through results and collaboration, earning respect independent of his relationship with Clara. And Clara remained exactly who she'd always been, demanding, brilliant, uncompromising, but with visible softness around the edges that made people whisper she seemed happier. She was happier. They both were. 6 months after that first dinner at Clara's penthouse, Daniel was sitting in a strategy meeting that had run long. It was 4 p.m., the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. and they were deep into discussing expansion timelines for the next fiscal year. Daniel felt fatigue creeping in, not the dangerous kind, just the normal end-of-long-day tiredness that came with back-to-back meetings and complex problem-solving. He blinked hard, trying to refocus on the presentation, felt his attention wavering. Then Clara's hand came to rest on his shoulder. Not a question this time, just steady pressure, subtle and supportive and absolutely certain. Daniel leaned into it slightly, let himself draw strength from the contact, then straightened and refocused on the meeting. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't comment. It was just Clara being Clara, aware of her people, responsive to their needs, providing support without making it a spectacle. When the meeting finally ended, they walked out together with the natural ease of people who'd learned to navigate professional and personal boundaries seamlessly. "Dinner at my place tonight?" Clara asked quietly. "I promised Emma I'd help her practice multiplication tables. She's been looking forward to it all week. Fair warning, she's gotten competitive about math lately. Wonder where she learned that?" "Definitely from you." Clara smiled. "I'll bring flashcards. And ice cream. You can't learn multiplication without proper incentives." At Clara's penthouse that evening, Daniel watched Emma and Clara engaged in intense multiplication practice, complete with a point system and dramatic celebrations for correct answers. Emma was laughing, completely unself-conscious, while Clara awarded points with theatrical flair. 7 times 8, Clara called out. "Was it? 56, Emma shouted back. "Correct, that's 10 points. You're destroying me." "I told you I'm good at patterns." Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Board meeting notes are ready for your review. Also, wanted to say thanks for the recommendation letter. Got into the MBA program." He smiled, typed back congratulations, then set the phone down. Clara caught his eye across the room, her expression asking the question she always asks now. "You good?" He nodded. More than good. Because this, Emma laughing over math problems, Clara being goofy and competitive, dinner cooking in the kitchen while city lights sparkled outside the windows, this was home. Not the apartment he'd been surviving in for 3 years. Not even the penthouse with its expensive furniture and million-dollar view. Home was this, the 3 of them together, building something that felt less like survival and more like actually living. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in Clara's guest room, they'd started keeping a bed there for nights when it got too late to drive home. Daniel and Clara stood on the balcony overlooking the river. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Dangerous." She smiled but didn't rise to the bait. "I want to make this official. Not just us dating. I want us to be a family." Daniel's heart kicked hard against his ribs. Clara said, "I know it's fast by conventional standards, but nothing about us has been conventional. And I'm tired of pretending this is temporary or experimental. I want to wake up with you and Emma every morning. I want to be there for school projects and bedtime stories and sick days and everything." "Are you asking me to move in?" "I'm asking for more than that." Clara turned to face him fully, her expression vulnerable in ways she used to hide. "I'm asking if you'll marry me, if you'll let me be Emma's stepmother, if you'll build a life with me that's not about professional boundaries or careful distance, but about actually choosing each other every single day." Daniel stared at her, his mind racing. 3 months ago, this would have seemed impossible. 6 months ago, he'd been alone and drowning, convinced that survival was the best he could hope for. Now Clara Vaughn was standing on her balcony asking him to marry her, and every logical reason to say no felt meaningless compared to the one overwhelming truth. "Yes," he said. "To all of it, yes." Clara's smile was blinding. "Yeah? Yeah. But on one condition." Her expression flickered with uncertainty. "What condition?" "We tell Emma together, tomorrow. I'm not making this decision without her input. She's 6. She's also part of this family, and she gets a say in whether her life changes this dramatically." Clara nodded slowly. "You're right. We tell her together." They went inside, stood over Emma's sleeping form. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was a baby. "What if she says no?" Clara whispered. "She won't. But if she does, then we slow down. We wait until she's ready. Because she comes first, always." Clara's hand found his again. You're an incredible father. I'm just trying not to screw up too badly. You're succeeding. The next morning, over pancakes that Clara made slightly too thick and Emma declared perfect anyway, they sat Emma down for the conversation. So, Daniel started, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been since Emma's first day of kindergarten, Clara and I want to talk to you about something important. Emma looked up from her pancakes, syrup on her chin, eyes bright with curiosity. Okay, Clara took a breath. Emma, your dad and I love each other very much, and we love you very much, and we've been thinking about what it might look like if we all lived together as a family. Like you moving into our apartment? Emma asked. More like all of us moving somewhere new together, Daniel said. A place that would be all of ours. Emma considered this, swirling her fork in syrup. Would I have to change schools? No, Clara said quickly. We'd find somewhere in the same district. You wouldn't lose any of your friends. Would Clara be my mom? The question hung in the air. Daniel started to answer, but Clara gently touched his arm. I would never try to replace your mom, Clara said carefully. She'll always be your mom, and it's important that you remember her and love her. But I would be your stepmom, which means I'd be there for you, support you, care about you, help raise you, if that's something you'd want. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her 6-year-old mind processing concepts that most adults struggled with. Would you still do puzzles with me? She asked finally. Every week, at minimum. And help with homework? Whenever you need it. And read bedtime stories? As many as you want. Emma nodded slowly. Okay, then yeah, you can be my stepmom, and we can be a family. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Yeah? Yeah? But Emma held up a finger with the seriousness of a tiny negotiator. I want a cat. Daniel laughed despite the emotion clogging his throat. You're using this as leverage for a cat? Clara said she was thinking about getting a cat. If we're all living together, we should definitely get one. Clara and Daniel exchanged glances. Clara was trying not to laugh. We can discuss the cat, Daniel said diplomatically. That means yes, Emma translated. I know parent language. They spent the rest of breakfast talking logistics in the way you do with a 6-year-old. What her new room might look like, whether they could paint it purple, if there was space for all her art supplies. Emma had opinions about everything, and both adults listened with the understanding that this was her life changing too. The engagement became official 2 weeks later when Clara took Emma shopping for rings, because this is a family decision, which means Emma should help choose, and came back with a simple platinum band that caught the light in a way that reminded Daniel of Clara's eyes. The office found out through carefully managed channels. HR was notified first, then the board, then a company-wide memo that was professional but warm. The response was overwhelmingly positive, though Daniel knew there were still whispers, still people who thought the whole thing was inappropriate or rushed. He didn't care anymore. He'd learned something crucial over the past year. You couldn't live your life trying to satisfy other people's expectations. You could only be honest about what you needed and who you loved and hope that was enough. It was enough. The wedding was small, just Emma as flower girl, Sarah as maid of honor, a handful of close friends and colleagues. Clara wore a simple cream dress. Daniel wore a navy suit. Emma wore purple with stars and took her role as keeper of the rings very seriously. When they exchanged vows on a Saturday afternoon in a garden overlooking the river, Daniel thought about the path that had led them here. How a moment of complete weakness, collapsing from exhaustion in a conference room, had somehow become the foundation of the greatest strength he'd ever known. Clara's vows were characteristically direct. I promise to see you, not just as my husband, but as the person you are, to support you when you're struggling and celebrate you when you're succeeding, to be a partner to you and a parent to Emma, to choose this family, every day, even when it's hard. Daniel's vows were simpler. I promise to let you take care of me the way I take care of you, to trust that needing help isn't weakness, to build a life with you that's not about survival, but about actually being happy. I promise to love you exactly as you are, brilliant and demanding and occasionally terrifying and absolutely perfect. Emma, standing between them, stage whispered, Are you going to kiss now? That's how weddings work. They kissed, to applause and Emma's dramatic gagging sounds, and officially became a family in all the ways that mattered. That night, in the house they'd chosen together, not Clara's penthouse or Daniel's apartment, but something new that belonged to all of them, Daniel found Clara standing in the kitchen at midnight, still in her wedding dress, making tea. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "Too happy to sleep." "Is that a thing?" "If it is, I have it too." She turned, and in the soft kitchen light, she looked younger than Daniel had ever seen her, less guarded, completely open. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For falling asleep on my shoulder, for being exhausted enough to let me see you needed help, for giving me the chance to be something more than just the CEO who terrifies people." Daniel crossed to her, pulled her close. "Thank you for catching me, for refusing to let me keep drowning alone, for loving my daughter like she's yours." "She is mine. You both are." From down the hall, they heard Emma call out, "Dad? Clara? I can't sleep." They exchanged knowing looks. This was life now. Interrupted sleep and homework help and soccer practices and board meetings and somehow making it all work. "I'll go," Clara said. "We'll both go." They walked down the hall together into Emma's room where she was sitting up in bed with her stuffed elephant. "I had a dream about the wedding," Emma said. "It was good, but now I'm awake." "Want us to stay until you fall back asleep?" Clara offered. Emma nodded, scooting over to make room. So they climbed into her small bed, one parent on each side. Emma squeezed between them like the world's most precious sandwich filling. It was cramped and slightly absurd and absolutely perfect. "Tell me about the dream," Daniel said. "Everyone was there," Emma murmured, already drifting off. "You and Clara and all my friends and Mommy was there too. She was smiling. She said she was happy we found Clara." Daniel's throat tightened. Beside him, he felt Clara go very still. "That's a beautiful dream, sweetheart," he whispered. "She said to tell you it's okay, that she wants you to be happy." Emma's eyes were closing. "And she said to tell Clara thank you for taking care of us." Clara made a small, broken sound. Daniel reached across Emma to find Clara's hand, squeezed it tight. "We are happy," Daniel said softly. "All of us. So happy." But Emma was already asleep, her breathing evening out into the gentle rhythm of childhood dreams. Daniel and Clara stayed there, bracketing their daughter in warmth and love and safety, neither willing to move and break the perfect stillness of the moment. This was it, Daniel thought. This was what he'd been stumbling toward through 3 years of grief and exhaustion and barely holding on. Not just survival, but this. A family built from broken pieces and fierce love and the willingness to be weak enough to let someone else be strong. Clara's thumb traced circles on his hand, a silent conversation in the darkness. They'd taken the hardest path possible, falling for each other across professional boundaries, navigating office politics and custody concerns, and the complicated reality of building a family from loss. But they'd done it together, with honesty and patience and stubborn determination to get it right. And they had gotten it right. Daniel finally understood what home meant. Not a place, not even a person, but this exact combination of people choosing each other every single day, choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to help and be helped, choosing love over fear. Years from now, when people asked how they'd gotten together, Daniel knew he'd tell them the truth. It started with a moment of weakness in a conference room when exhaustion made him collapse on his boss's shoulder and she didn't push him away. But what it really was, what it had always been, was two people finding the courage to be human with each other, to need and be needed, to stop surviving alone and start building something together. From weakness came strength. From breaking came healing. From the moment he'd fallen came the moment he'd finally truly landed. Home.